So hello everybody, welcome to episode 15 of the Almond Sport podcast. So in our last episode we had our Olympian and Commonwealth Games medalist shooter Tim Neal, and we're always got the top guests in here for you at Almond Sport. So we've today got Andy Fox, no stranger to the podcast, and we've got John Whiting. Welcome gents, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Very well, thanks, Trev.
Excellent. And today's podcast is a bit of a feature, really. It's a bit of a feature about Almond Sport and specifically about the Almond Sport Committee. And you two gentlemen are members of that committee and have been now for coming up for 2 years. We've got a bit of a reshuffle in Almond Sport coming up. The process lasts every sort of 2 years. And we invite new people to come in and apply to be members of Almond Sport. So we're going to get a bit of a flavour from these two gentlemen today about what being an Almond Sport member is all about. So, I mean, gents, casting your minds back over 2 years ago now when you applied, what sort of prompted you to apply? What was your motivation to get involved? Start with you, John?
Okay, well I guess I'd always seen this august body called Almond Sport, and somebody who I knew very well and have known through sport for many years, Gary Corkle, is the chairman. And I had a chat with him and said, well, I see these elections. I said, well, what's it all about? He gave me an idea of what the committees did and the commitment needed, and said, well, just apply and see how it goes. So, yeah, probably just about 2 years ago now, I put my application in. And I had an interview with some of the current members of Almond Sport and also representatives from Mike Sport and Recreation. I had Paul Bridson, who was the sort of the man on the panel. And to my great delight, a few weeks later, I got the note saying, we'd like to invite you to join Almond Sport. And that was it for me.
Fantastic. Andy, about yourself?
Yeah,
how did you get involved?
well, the process for getting on to the committee was similar, really. And went through the interview, etc. Enjoyed the interview process actually, and found it an interesting sort of scenario. But personally, why? I've been involved in sport all my life really, since I can remember. Very much involved in the organisation of sport, my particular sport on the Isle of Man, and still trying to take part in it as well. And 2017 I retired from teaching. That year, rather shockingly, surprisingly, had a minor stroke as well, so kind of had to do a bit of rethinking where I was going with my life, I suppose. Perhaps running wasn't going to be, quite to the fore as it had been. And so what else could I do in a way with sport apart from just coaching or whatever? So it felt like a good way to give a bit back, do something a bit different, and maybe perhaps give a bit of benefit of the experience I've developed over the years. Interestingly, though, since then I've had a renaissance in the running, so things have come good. But yeah, so that's where it came from for me.
Excellent. I mean, it would be remiss of me not to say, I mean, the two gentlemen we're with today are sporting icons in the Isle of Man, I would say. John in particular in the world of hockey. John, just give us we should get a bit of background about you guys. What's your sort of hockey background, John? What sort of involvement have you had?
I'd never refer to me as a sporting icon, certainly not in the company today. I was never a particularly good hockey player. I only started playing hockey when I moved to the island in about 1990, and I was an average club player. And then as these things, I've got 3 boys who all play. And I started coaching, and somebody said, oh, you ought to do your next level of coaching because then you can actually take sessions. So I thought, okay, I did that. And then I said, well, why don't you keep going? And I've carried on through the England hockey and GB hockey programme. And in 2011, the Island ladies were looking for a coach. I think it was 2011, I'll probably get corrected now. So I was invited to do that, and I did that for several years. Travelled all over the place with them to sort of inter-island games and UK tournaments. And they were very successful. And somebody managed to put me up for Coach of the Year and in the sports awards. I don't know how I won that with all the cracking coaches that are out there. And then I still said, well, I've done as much as I can with the ladies, I'll try the men. And took over the men, 14, 15. And subsequently, I've been the Almond men's coach ever since. And I'm a far more qualified coach than I ever was a player, let's put it that way.
Well, exactly. Well, that's why you're an icon in hockey, John. I mean, you've taken 2 national squads, and you've also worked through the advanced coach programme for England hockey as well, so don't play yourself down.
Oh, thank you. But certainly I haven't got the sporting achievements of Mr. Fox.
Well, yeah, Mr. Fox, I mean, obviously I've known you for a long time for athletics, and it just gives a bit of background of some of the things you've been up to in the world of running.
Well, over the years, obviously, run many Island Games and lucky enough to be successful in a fair few. Still hold a few senior records on the Isle of Man for steeplechase, obviously. And at the moment I'm trying to rewrite the over 60s record, although with mixed success so far. But anyway, so basically, been involved in running all my life. But interesting listening to John speaking there about how he's taken people further than he did in his career, and I think that's a good measure for a coach. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've taken people to represent GB in European Championships and World Cross Country Championships and things like this, which obviously I never reached that standard. So, from my point of view, that's the thing that a coach tries to do, is help people to move further than they did, and perhaps hopefully as far as they can possibly get in their career.
Well, it's no surprise that you both applied to become members of Almond Sport, because you, as a coach, you want to try and leave people in a better place than when they came to you, aren't you? So, obviously with Almond Sport, you're trying to help leave sport in the Isle of Man in a better place. So the principles are very much align. So
I think it's the putting something back. I mean, Andy said, we want to put something back. We've had a good life out of being in and around sport. And it's as bringing the next generation on, and a comment that was made at the Sports Awards yesterday, the Sport Aid Awards, was that helping people be the best they can be. I can never aspire to run like these guys can or play like they can, but you can just say, well, if you take this step and then pass them on to a coach that can take them to the next level and the next level, until, as Andy says, we've had world champions, GB athletes here, and it's very good for a small place to the number of people we turn out.
Absolutely, there's an awful lot of pride being involved with sport in the Isle of Man, and we very much punch above our weight for sure. Okay.
So I guess now we've got to talk about what we do on our committees, have we?
Almost. I mean, but before we get there, what were your first 2 years like as members of Almond Sport? What sort of highlights have you had along the way?
I don't know if we could call them highlights. Surprises, nice surprises, some less nice surprises. The breadth of the work we're expected to get involved in. I never thought that Isle of Man Sport had anything to do with sort of football pitches, and I thought it was very much more centred around the National Sports Centre and those sports. But we actually, the grassroots level work that's done is quite astounding, and getting involved with facilities. I mean, we've even started this week talking about the Island Games in 2027, so we're looking 9 years ahead, 7 years ahead. I can't even count them and count. There you go. We're looking 7 years ahead already, and it's that planning and organisation that did surprise me, the level of involvement that Almond Sport has in shepherding these things towards the right conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, it's got a lot of breadth to it, isn't it? It's not just performance. It's when you look at as you alluded to before, John, the Almond Sport is comprised of 2 subcommittees, and both of you guys sit on one of those each. So, John, subcommittee that you belong to, do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown of the?
Well, I guess as this is this podcast is an advert for people to apply for Isle of Man Sport, we better say what happens. So the Isle of Man Sport has 8 members, and we're split into 2 subcommittees. The Sport Aid Committee, which Andy will tell you everybody about, and I'm on the Sports Liaison Committee. And we're the guys that we deal with all the grassroots. We deal with 20, 21, 22 sports and others applying to become recognised and part of the family. And we get the tough old job of dishing out an ever diminishing pool of cash to these sports. So we have to set ground rules for them. We have to set our objectives, what we'd like to see in sports. And we are, I suppose the Sports Liaison Committee is about participation. We're about participation, we're about coaching, we're about volunteers, and more and more, as you hear these stories come out of British Gymnastics, currently is going through a big process of having a look at what's been going on. Governance within our sports, and we've had we had a number of issues in the Almond, I shouldn't play them down, in sports where coaches and or administrators and or parents have not done the right thing by their athletes. And we are, as a sports liaison committee, trying to set out governance standards, coaches, safeguarding courses, first aid courses, other administration types of course for people who are working in sports to protect them as much as anything else. Because if you get an allegation made against you, you want to be able to say, well, I've done everything I should have done, and this has happened. You don't want to be in a court or in a hearing or tribunal trying to say, well, I never knew I should have been doing any of this. So that currently is the focus for Sports Liaison Committee. We are trying to get all the sports to up their game in that side of things. Make sure that their people do have the tools to do their job properly, do know where to report if something is going wrong, and make it the best for our athletes. We do get a decent sum of money through the lottery, and we have to allocate it out, and all the sports bid for that funding, and it is a job which it's interesting, but it is hard to try and work out who gets what and what you should support over another. I am an accountant in my background. I can look at a sheet of figures quite quickly, and take the ideas out of them. But every sport is different. Everyone's got different ideas how they should do things, and it's just trying to get some common ground. And we do have a great backup team from the sports development officers, the sports liaison officers, and they do help us a lot. So that's probably enough about Sport Liaison Committee. And you might want to ask Andy about what Sport Aid does, because that's a separate committee, but we all come together once a month as one big committee to swap ideas and make sure everybody's happy with what the other committee's up to.
Okay, so from grassroots sports and clubs and funding for all sorts of projects, from facilities through to coaching and governance, to Andy, tell us a bit about Sport Aid.
Well, I guess what we're saying with Sports Liaison is that that's about trying to make the sport as effective and efficient as possible for the good of everybody. Sport Aid is looking probably at, and I don't want to say the elite, but the sports people who are trying to become the best they can be. And I'd imagine every sports person's trying to do that, but the guys who are in sport, who in Sport Aid and on Sport Aid programs, are those who have perhaps been identified as the individuals who could go on to make a great success of their sport. And of course that then has a beneficial effect for the Isle of Man, because it sets up role models for younger people to follow. It also puts the Isle of Man's name on the map. Everyone knows about the TT races, but if you go across Europe, they all know about Mark Cavendish and the Isle of Man as well. So, one individual can have that sort of effect as well, which can then have a beneficial effect on sport generally, and the place you live, etc. So, this phrase, to help the best sports people be the best they can be, is very much what Sport Aid is about. So how does that come about? Well, it comes about through the funding, as John has mentioned. So basically, money can be made available to enable individuals to further their sport. So there's a series of different levels of funding that athletes can be placed upon, dependent upon where they are within their careers and how things are developing for them. And what this can be used for is living expenses dependent upon what they might be and where they're going. It can be used for travel, it can be used for equipment, etc. Then also through Sport Aid, there are a number of services here within the Sports Institute that individuals can make use of. So these are things like guidance from the point of view of younger people through the Sports Aid Academy. So 40 to 80 youngsters every 2 years coming through and getting a bit of a sort of flavour of what it's like to be a professional sports person and how you can make perhaps the transition from where you are now to where you want to be in 7 or 8 years' time perhaps. And then also sports guides to help some of the people who are already there but maybe perhaps losing their way a little bit as to how they can make the transition to the next stage they need to get to. Then of course there's the nutritional services that are sort of so important for people in particular sports, but all sports in many ways. The psychology services, strength and conditioning, which you know all about, Trev, and your main areas, physio, massage, etc. So the fact that individuals are now having all this kind of advice, all this potential support that they can fit into and make use of is kind of helping them to sort of make that sort of development which perhaps individuals 20 or 30 years ago were trying to solve all the problems themselves. And as we know, you talk to any successful sports person, they talk about the team around them. Well, on the Isle of Man, we can't have lots of individual teams around individual athletes. So what Sport Aid has done, in my view, it's produced a team that all of our top sports people can use to help them make that progression. And I was looking at the diagram you've got on your wall in there, the iceberg illusion. So the iceberg illusion is basically you just see the tip of the iceberg above the water, and everything looks like it's all going swimmingly well and it's all successful. But actually, what you don't see is the bulk of the iceberg under the water, and that's where all the hard work, all the advice, all the support, all the coaching, all the other bits and bobs that are needed to make that successful sports person you see above the water, it all happens hidden away, and that's what Isle of Man Sport Aid does, in my view.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I mean, quite often sometimes the financial support is seen as the sort of the main aspect of getting support as an athlete, but it's far more sophisticated than that. And
yeah, I mean, financial support is important, obviously, because we live on an island. You have to get away to compete, and obviously that's difficult at the moment for lots of reasons. But obviously that is an important aspect. But actually, if you want to become a top sports person, it's a whole new way of thinking. It's a new way of life, really. You've got to make that transition from a young person who's good at whatever it is you do to where you want to go. And that's not just going to happen by having 500 quid to pay for a few trips on the steam packet to go away and compete. You've got to do a lot more than that. And so the guys who are involved in Sport Aid and starting off in the Sport Academy, they're kind of learning that actually, it's quid pro quo. You're going to get this help and this advice, but you've got to do something in return, and that something in return is making sure, for example, if you have a sponsor, that you keep in touch with the sponsor, you keep them happy, you ensure they know how things are going and what successes you've had, that you work with the guides who are working with you, work with the nutritionists, etc., and don't just listen to the advice, but actually use it and make the most of it.
I mean, performance is multifaceted, isn't it? There's so many different sides to a performance. It's not just the technical and tactical side of things, but you've got to look into the physical and the psychological and the social and emotional, which all build up to that. And you alluded to the Sport Aid Academy there, and a lot of the workshops on the Sport Aid Academy are around developing the key behaviours for success and building those behaviours at an early stage in your development. So hopefully, as you progress as an athlete, it's those key behaviours that can make the difference between going up to the next level and not.
Yeah, I mean, as a teacher, a former teacher, I see that actually it's very, very much connected with education. It's about learning, coaching. It's about learning, isn't it? The guys that John coaches in hockey, that team element. You're as strong as the whole. One individual isn't going to make the team. And it's the same with an individual sport, because you can go and have the success on the track or in the swimming pool or whatever, but a whole host of people have helped behind the scenes to get you to that point. And appreciating them for what they've done is important as well. But I think the main issue though is it's about learning. And my kind of view is that in a way, coaching and being involved in sport aid and Isle of Man sport generally has kind of been a continuation of what I've been doing all my life, really. So from that point of view, it's been a rewarding thing to be involved in.
Absolutely. So it'd probably be good to have a quick talk about how would someone go through that sport aid process? How does that sort of work? How do you guys work as a committee to sort of select who comes on to sport aid?
Well, basically, to get onto sports aid, it comes down to the individual sports and the recommendations that they make to the sport aid committee. So every sport should have a head of performance or will have a head of performance, because sometimes people give up their position and there's someone else to come back into that position. So each sport will have its own sort of assessment of its athletes or its sports people. Will make recommendations to sport aid, and then those recommendations will be assessed by the committee, as well as the officers who are employed by Mag Sport and Recreation, obviously. And then between the two, decisions made as to who will come on to sport aid, and quite often that will involve an interview, etc. But what you have to remember is we now have the Sport Aid Academy, which has been running for 5 or 6 years, maybe a bit longer. And the Sport Aid Academy means that there shouldn't really be too many surprises, because most of these young people have actually come through the academy, so we already know them reasonably well. So what you're looking at really is a series of stepping stones from one area into the next, as the athlete progresses. And of course, some people will get to a certain point and actually say, well, I don't really want to go any further, I'm perfectly happy where I am, and that's perfectly fine as well. It just means that individual will probably come away from sport aid and go on to enjoying their hockey or their football or their athletics on a more recreational basis, perhaps. But others have the opportunity to take it further if they wish to.
And I suppose the fantastic thing about sport, whether you're taking using it just recreationally or whether you're trying to go into higher performance levels, at whatever point you get to, there's a lot of fantastic skills and attributes that you've developed through sport that you can use in any aspect of life.
Yeah, we were at this event yesterday, which was basically giving the sports aid monies and financial awards out and support awards out to different individuals. And of course, some of those individuals will go on to become very successful in their sports, and some may not become so successful, but hopefully they will have enjoyed the journey and learned a lot. But of course, what you learn through taking part in sport and progressing and developing in sport is to be goal-orientated, to overcome difficulties as they arise, because it's never always going to be a straightforward situation, and basically to try and make success out of sometimes failure, and actually turn something round and make it into something that is going to actually lead to more of a development over time. And this kind of stuff, these are the kind of soft skills that employers want to see as well. So you're not just doing something that's going to help you and your sport, but eventually over time it's going to be something that's going to help you become a more successful person in life, and I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, I think it's not the setback, it's how you react to that setback.
Yeah.
And certainly for business, we see exactly the same graphs in business teaching as you do in sports teaching. It's not a linear progression. There will be great moments and there will be deep troughs. And it's how the person reacts to both of those and sort of smooths themselves out means that they will get to a higher point at the end rather than leaving themselves short of where they actually could. And Andy sells the Sports Aid Committee short because their job is made so much more difficult by the different ages and the different maturities the different performance pathways in all these sports to actually sift through the applications and identify the athletes who are ready or nearly ready to make the next step. And then if they're not making the next step, to identify why they've plateaued, why they've stuck, and give them then the tools or the assistance that they either do make the next step, or as Andy says, well, that's it, I'm okay, I play for the Ireland, that'll be fine by me. And then the others, you do see the Mark Cavendishes and Peter Kennicks and that go on to the world stage and make extremely successful professional careers out of it. And those guys do put money back. And we shouldn't underestimate that. And they support Mike's Sport Aid. They come back to the presentations. They do podcasts and videos like this, and they inspire the younger guys and girls that are coming through, saying, "Well, we did it. You've got the same support network as we had. Come on, you can do it too." And as Andy said, it's a lot of life skills learned in sport that people can carry through.
Brilliant to hear the passion in you guys when you're talking about it as well. It comes through in spades. So we've been going for about 25 minutes now, so we'll start closing things up. So, I mean, a good place to leave it would be, what would you say to any prospective people out there who might be looking at applying to become a member of Almond Sport?
Well, I would say have a go. I would also say, if you look on the Almond Sport website, you'll find pictures of Andy, pictures of me, pictures of the other 6 ladies and gents that are on the committee. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm easily found on the internet or through a hockey website. If somebody wants to ask further details, please do. I know Paul Callow, the sport administrator. Paul will be happy to talk people through what the application process is, what they should expect, whether it's for them. And it really has been the next step for me. I'm sort of plateaued at that island coach, whatever level, and this is the next step for me. I'm always looking for where the next place to go is. And I'm really delighted to be putting something back and helping some of the other sports, because you said I'm hockey, Andy's athletics, but I know people in all sorts of other sports, and I like to think sometimes we're helping them get their sport a little bit better, get more people playing, get more people involved. I noticed this week that there's now going to be another attempt to reduce the island's obesity rates. The Chief Minister announced this week. So get out there and play sport, and let's give as many people the opportunity to do that as we can.
Yeah, I'd underline that as well. Basically, if you're interested, if you feel you've got something to offer, then apply. You'll only learn through the process whether you get onto the Isle of Man Sport or not, and there will be opportunities that come up every couple of years. So go through the process once. If you have to go through it another time, but either way, go through the process and try and get into or onto Isle of Man Sport and try and do the work that we've got involved in to try and help take things forward, because I think it is very exciting. It's a great place to be involved and thing to be involved in. The other thing I would say as well is that sport, I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we've all realised actually that sometimes you need more than just surviving to get through life. And I know there's family and there's work and there's everything else in life, but sport can actually be something that gets people through. And it can be just the guy who decides, right, I'm going to get off the couch and do a bit of running or walking, through to the young female swimmer who's going to go to the Olympics perhaps. Everyone deciding, right, well, I'm going to get the most I can out of my sport. And all of the positives that come with that, and obviously the mental health and physical health is part of that as well. So if you're involved in something like Isle of Man Sport, in meetings and in some of the initiatives that we're involved in, you'll be talking about all these sorts of things that have a massive knock-on effect on our society and on our nation. And I think it's a really good thing to be involved in, so I'd encourage anyone interested to make an application.
Yeah, we were appointed for 4-year terms, so Andy and I are in our second year, as you said at the start. But there are 8 people on Almond Sport, and 4 are up for either re-election or stepping down. Nobody, until the process is closed, nobody knows who's reapplying and who's not. But there are certainly, obviously there are vacancies there. And I'd encourage anybody who wanted to make a little bit more of a difference in Almond sport to apply.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for all your comments, gents, and your time this morning. So for people who would be interested in applying, you would need to send your application through to Paul Callow, paul.callow@gov.im, or you can also phone Paul for some information on 688 555. And the applications close Monday the 17th of August. So that leaves us now to head off into the sunset, gentlemen, and carry on with our goal of helping sport in the Isle of Man, and have yourselves a fantastic day, and thank you once again for your time, gentlemen.
Cheers, Trev.
Thanks, Trev.